Hey, what is up everyone? You're about to listen to the beginner's guide about Warhammer 40,000. It's gonna be narrated by Frederick Surrey. So yeah, enjoy and watch till the end.
Welcome, traveler, to a universe unlike any other, a place where hope flickers like a candle in an endless storm, where humanity clings to survival not with optimism, but with bitter determination. This is Warhammer 40,000, often simply called 40K, and tonight we're going to explore this vast, intricate setting together. Whether you've stumbled upon this universe through video games, miniatures in a shop window, or simply heard whispers of the Emperor and his space marines, you're about to discover why millions of people have fallen in love with this grim darkness of the far future. Close your eyes for a moment and imagine the year 40,000. Not the bright, clean future of Star Trek, nor the adventure-filled galaxy of Star Wars. Instead, picture a universe where 1,000,000 worlds burn with the fires of unending war, where every victory is paid for in oceans of blood, and where the greatest empire humanity has ever known teeters on the brink of extinction with every passing day. This is not a story of triumph, but of survival against impossible odds. And yet, within this darkness, there are tales of incredible heroism, of bonds forged in the crucible of battle, of warriors who face down nightmares that would shatter mortal minds. The grim darkness of the far future. Let's begin where all good stories begin, with setting the scene. The universe of Warhammer 40,000 exists in what Games Workshop, the British company that created this setting in 1987, calls the grim darkness of the far future. This phrase isn't just marketing speak, it's a promise, a warning, and an aesthetic philosophy all rolled into one. The galaxy in the 41st millennium is a place of constant warfare. Not the occasional skirmish between nations, but total, all-consuming conflict that spans entire star systems. Imagine wars where billions of soldiers clash on a single world, where cities the size of continents burn for decades, where the very fabric of reality can tear open to unleash horrors from a dimension of pure chaos. This is the scale we're talking about. Time in this universe is measured in a specific way. When you see a date written as 9999.M41, you're looking at year 4099 in what would be our calendar. The M stands for Millennium, so M41 means the 41st millennium. This dating system tells us immediately that we're looking at a story set roughly 38,000 years in our future. Humanity has spread across the stars, but at a terrible cost. The Milky Way galaxy contains millions of inhabited worlds, and humanity controls about 1,000,000 of them under the banner of something called the Imperium of Man. But space is vast beyond comprehension, and between these worlds lurk countless threats. Some are alien species, creatures of flesh and blood, who want nothing more than to exterminate or enslave humanity. Others are more insidious, entities from a parallel dimension of madness and nightmare that seek to corrupt human souls and drag them into damnation. What makes Warhammer 40,000 unique among science fiction settings is its unflinching commitment to this dark vision. There are no easy answers here, no guaranteed happy endings. The Imperium of Man, humanity's greatest civilization, is itself a nightmarish totalitarian theocracy where individual lives mean nothing and trillions toil in darkness, never knowing that distant stars exist. And yet, this oppressive regime might be the only thing keeping humanity from extinction. This philosophical complexity, this moral ambiguity, is part of what draws people to 40K. It asks uncomfortable questions about the price of survival, about whether the ends can justify the means, about what happens when good intentions curdle into dogma and fanaticism over 10,000 years. The universe operates on a principle Games Workshop famously codified in one of the most iconic taglines in gaming. In the grim darkness of the far future, there is only war. War isn't just a feature of this universe. It's the fundamental state of existence. Entire generations are born, live, and die, never knowing a moment of peace. The Imperium maintains countless military forces, from the superhuman space marines to the uncounted trillions of ordinary human soldiers in the Astra Militarum, formerly known as the Imperial Guard. But for all this darkness, there's something deeply appealing about the setting's honesty. It doesn't pretend that war is glorious or clean. It shows the horror and brutality, while also exploring what drives people to fight anyway. Duty, honor, brotherhood, the simple desire to protect those who cannot protect themselves. These motivations shine all the brighter against the darkness surrounding them. The technology in this universe is fascinating because it's both incredibly advanced and strangely primitive. Humanity once possessed scientific knowledge that made them masters of the galaxy during an age called the Dark Age of Technology, roughly 25,000 years before the current setting. But knowledge was lost during a catastrophic collapse, and by the 41st millennium, technology has become more religious ritual than scientific process. The Adeptus Mechanicus, the priesthood of Mars, who maintain humanity's technology, treat machines as sacred objects inhabited by machine spirits. They perform elaborate rituals and prayers when activating equipment, because they've forgotten the underlying principles that make it work. A tech priest might spend hours anointing a tank with sacred oils and chanting the proper litanies, not realizing that what they're actually doing is checking oil levels and running diagnostics. The knowledge has become dogma, the process more important than the understanding. This loss of knowledge permeates the entire Imperium. Ships navigate through a hellish alternate dimension called the warp, because the ancient technology that might allow safer travel has been lost. Communication between distant worlds takes weeks or months, not because of the distance, but because messages must be sent via psychic individuals called astropaths, whose minds touch the warp to transmit across the void. And all of this is held together by an entity known as the Emperor, whose will and power maintain the Imperium even as his body slowly decays on a golden throne. The God Emperor and the Imperium of man. At the heart of everything in Warhammer 40,000 sits the Emperor of mankind, not sitting as an active ruler anymore, but rather entombed within an arcane device called the Golden Throne, deep beneath the Imperial Palace on Terra, which is what Earth is called in this future age. The Emperor's story begins tens of thousands of years ago, long before the Space Age, when he was born through the willing sacrifice of thousands of human shamans. These were not primitive witch doctors, but powerful psychic individuals who could sense the growing dangers in the immaterial realm of the warp. Fearing for humanity's future, they chose to merge their souls into a single, immortal being of unprecedented psychic might. That being would eventually be known as the Emperor. For millennia, the Emperor walked among humanity in secret, subtly guiding the species from the shadows. He witnessed the rise and fall of civilizations, walked the streets of ancient Babylon and Rome, perhaps even stood among the crowds during pivotal moments in history. His goal was always the same: to shepherd humanity toward a future where they might survive and prosper in a hostile universe. But eventually, secrecy was no longer enough. In the late 29th millennium, during what's called the Age of Strife, humanity's interstellar civilization collapsed. Warp storms made travel between worlds impossible, and countless human colonies found themselves cut off and alone. Some descended into barbarism, others were conquered by alien empires. It was a dark age that could have meant extinction for the species. The Emperor finally revealed himself during Terra's unification wars, roughly around the 29th millennium, using armies of superhuman warriors called Thunder Warriors. He conquered Earth and brought all of humanity's cradle world under his rule. But the Thunder Warriors were only the beginning, a prototype for something far greater. The Emperor, drawing upon knowledge gathered over countless lifetimes and genetic sciences beyond anything in the modern Imperium, created 20 beings called Primarchs. These weren't merely enhanced humans, they were demigods crafted from the Emperor's own genetic template, each designed to embody specific martial and mental virtues. Each Primarch was intended to lead one of 20 legions of Space Marines in a great crusade to reunite humanity's scattered colonies. But fate, or perhaps the machinations of dark powers, intervened. While still in their gestation capsules, the infant Primarchs were stolen by the Chaos Gods and scattered across the galaxy. They would land on different worlds, growing to maturity in vastly different circumstances, shaped by the cultures and hardships they encountered. Despite this setback, the Emperor launched the Great Crusade anyway. Using the genetic material from the lost Primarchs, he created the first Space Marine legions. Tens of thousands of enhanced warriors in each legion set forth from Terra to reclaim the stars in humanity's name. And as the crusade progressed, the Emperor located his lost sons one by one, reuniting them with their legions. For 2 centuries, the Great Crusade seemed unstoppable. Legion after legion of Space Marines, supported by billions of regular human soldiers and the immense resources of a united Terra, swept across the galaxy. Alien empires fell, human worlds were brought back into the Imperial fold, and it seemed as though humanity might actually achieve the Emperor's vision of dominance over the galaxy. The Emperor created the Imperium not as a democracy or even a traditional empire, but as a highly centralized authoritarian state, with himself at its apex. Every world brought into compliance had to abandon its own culture, its own beliefs, and accept imperial law. The Emperor preached something called the imperial truth, a secular philosophy that rejected religion and superstition, insisting that reason and science should guide humanity. The irony of what would come later cannot be overstated. At the height of the Great Crusade, the Emperor made a fateful decision. He named Horus Lupercal, Primarch of the Lunar Wolves Legion and arguably the most brilliant of his sons, as War Master. Horus would command all the Imperium's military forces while the Emperor returned to Terra to work on a secret project. That project was the Imperial Webway, an attempt to create a human-accessible network of tunnels through space-time that would make warp travel unnecessary and free humanity from one of its greatest vulnerabilities. The Golden Throne was central to this project. This ancient device, discovered in ruins beneath the Himalayan mountains, was a relic from some previous age, possibly from the ancient Elder Empire, or even earlier. The Emperor modified it to serve as a gateway into the Webway. It required someone of immense psychic power to operate, and while some speculate that the Emperor intended one of his Primarchs for this role, ultimately, the Emperor himself would take up this burden in ways no one anticipated. What happened next was the greatest catastrophe in human history, the Horus Heresy. Horus, feeling abandoned by his father and manipulated by chaos, turned traitor. Half of the Space Marine legions followed him into rebellion. For 7 years, the galaxy burned in civil war as brother fought brother, legion against legion. The war culminated in the siege of Terra itself. Horus's forces breached the Imperial Palace, and in a final confrontation aboard Horus's flagship, the Emperor faced his most beloved son in single combat. The Emperor, who had always hoped to redeem Horus, held back until it was almost too late. Only when he saw that Horus was truly lost did the Emperor unleash his full power, obliterating Horus's soul entirely, but not before Horus inflicted terrible wounds that left the Emperor's body a broken husk. The Emperor's loyal sons found him barely alive and brought him to the Golden Throne. The same device meant to power the Webway was hurriedly modified to sustain the Emperor's failing body. For over 10,000 years now, the Emperor has sat immobile, his consciousness trapped between life and death, his psychic might stretched thin, maintaining crucial functions that keep the Imperium alive. The Emperor's role now is threefold. First, his psychic presence in the warp generates the Astronomicon, a beacon of light in the darkness of the immaterial realm that allows Imperial ships to navigate through the warp. Without this beacon, interstellar travel would be nearly impossible, and the Imperium would fragment into isolated worlds within a generation. Second, the Emperor's consciousness battles constantly against demonic entities in the warp, maintaining psychic wards that protect Terra itself from invasion from that hellish dimension. This is not a metaphorical battle, but a constant psychic war fought in a realm where thought becomes reality, and willpower is the only weapon. Third, and most terrible, maintaining the Emperor's existence requires a daily sacrifice. 1,000 human psychers are fed to the Golden Throne every single day. Their life force is drained to sustain the Emperor's own, their souls sacrificed so that billions might survive. Over the 10,000 years since the heresy, countless millions of these psychers have given their lives for an emperor most of them will never see. The Golden Throne itself is failing. This is perhaps the Imperium's darkest secret. The device's mechanisms are so ancient and complex that even the Adeptus Mechanicus's most learned tech priests cannot fully understand them, let alone repair them properly. With each passing century, more faults develop, more components break down. The Mechanicus works desperately to keep the throne functioning, but they fight a losing battle against entropy and time. If the Golden Throne fails completely, if the Emperor's body finally dies, the consequences are almost unimaginable. The Astronomicon would go dark, stranding millions of ships in the warp and cutting off worlds from each other. The psychic wards around Terra would fail, potentially allowing demons to pour through into the material realm at the very heart of the Imperium. Some even speculate that the Emperor's death might birth a new god in the warp, or perhaps allow him to be reborn in some new form. In the 10 millennia since the heresy, something extraordinary and terrible has happened. The Emperor, who rejected religion and declared there were no gods, has himself been deified. The imperial cult, also called the Adeptus Ministorum or Ecclesiarchy, teaches that the Emperor is the one true God of humanity. Temples spanning continents rise in his honor. Priests by the billions spread his worship. Saints perform miracles in his name. The population of the Imperium, with very few exceptions, believes absolutely in the Emperor's divinity. To them, he is the master of mankind, the God Emperor, the one being standing between them and annihilation. Prayer is as important as work, faith as vital as food. The Imperial Creed teaches that to doubt the Emperor is to invite damnation, that the alien and the mutant exist only to be destroyed, and that death in service to the Emperor is the greatest honor any human can achieve. This faith, for all its darkness, serves a purpose. In a universe where literal hell gods seek to corrupt human souls, where psychers can become gateways for demonic possession, absolute faith can be a shield against corruption. A mind fortified by unshakable belief is harder for chaos to penetrate. Faith gives purpose to people whose lives might otherwise be crushed by the grinding horror of existence in the 41st millennium. The Imperium's structure is Byzantine in its complexity. At the top sits the Senatorum Imperialis, or High Lords of Terra, an oligarchic council that governs in the Emperor's name. 12 powerful individuals, each representing different aspects of the Imperium's bureaucracy, make decisions that affect quadrillions of lives. The Master of the Administratum oversees the vast civil service. The Fabricator General of Mars speaks for the Adeptus Mechanicus. The Ecclesiarch leads the Imperial cult. The Lord Commander Militant controls the Astra Militarum, and so on. Recently, in current setting times around the start of the 42nd millennium, a momentous change occurred. Robute Guilliman, one of the loyalist primarchs who fought against Horus 10,000 years ago, was revived from a death-like stasis and has taken up the role of Lord Commander of the Imperium. As the Emperor's literal genetic son and a being of superhuman intellect, Guilliman now guides the Imperium through what might be its darkest hour. As a massive tear in reality called the Great Rift has split the galaxy in two. The Imperium controls, as mentioned, roughly 1 million worlds, but control is a relative term. Many worlds have only the most tenuous connection to the wider Imperium. Some pay their tithes and receive protection, but otherwise govern themselves with minimal interference. Others are heavily integrated, their entire economies geared toward producing specific resources or soldiers for the Imperial war machine. There are hive worlds, where billions live in towering arcologies that pierce the clouds, their lives spent in cramped manufactories or the lawless depths of the underhives. Agri-worlds, where vast plains are cultivated to feed distant systems. Forge worlds, ruled by the Mechanicus, their surfaces covered in factories and shrines to the machine god. Death worlds, where the environment itself is so hostile that only the strongest survive, making them prime recruiting grounds for elite military forces. And countless other classifications. Travel between these worlds is dangerous and uncertain. Ships must enter the warp, that dimension of chaos and madness, to cross interstellar distances in reasonable time. But the warp is not empty space. It's a realm where the laws of physics don't apply, where demons hunt, where a ship's journey might take days or decades depending on the whims of that impossible realm. Navigators, mutant humans with a third eye that can perceive the Astronomicon, guide ships through this nightmare. Even with their skills, ships are sometimes lost, arriving centuries late or never arriving at all. Communication is similarly fraught. Astropaths send messages by projecting their thoughts into the warp, where other astropaths distant stars away might receive them. But warp currents can distort or delay these messages. A warning of an invasion might arrive years after the world has already fallen. Orders might reach their destination long after the situation has changed. This communication lag is part of why the Imperium can seem so dysfunctional, why planets can be forgotten for generations, why bureaucratic nightmares are commonplace. The Imperium is not a monolithic entity with unified purpose. It's a vast, sprawling bureaucracy where different factions vie for power and influence, where one branch might be completely unaware of what another is doing. The Space Marines are theoretically under the Imperium's command, but in practice operate with near-total autonomy. The Inquisition answers to no one but itself and the Emperor. The Mechanicus guards its secrets jealously. The Ecclesiarchy has its own armies. This fractured structure is both strength and weakness, preventing any one tyrant from seizing total control, but also making coordinated action difficult. Yet somehow, despite all these handicaps, the Imperium endures. It has survived for 10,000 years of constant war, outlasted alien empires that seemed invincible, weathered invasions that should have destroyed it. Part of this is sheer scale. The Imperium is so vast that even catastrophic defeats are merely setbacks. Entire sectors can fall, and the Imperium barely notices. Part of it is the fanatical determination of its people, who have been taught from birth that service to the Emperor is the highest calling. And part of it is the grim mathematics of a civilization that can throw away lives in quantities that would horrify us, but that they consider acceptable losses. The Imperium is simultaneously the last, best hope for human survival and a nightmarish dystopia. It grinds up lives without mercy, treats individual human beings as little more than resources to be expended, enforces brutal conformity, and will destroy entire worlds if they're deemed beyond redemption. Yet it's also all that stands between humanity and extinction, a bulwark against threats that would gladly see every human dead or enslaved or worse. This moral complexity, this refusal to present a simple good versus evil narrative, is central to Warhammer 40,000's appeal. The Imperium is monstrous. It's also necessary for survival. Both things are true simultaneously. And that uncomfortable truth is part of what makes the setting so fascinating to explore. The forces of chaos. If the Imperium represents humanity's determination to survive through order, however brutal, then chaos represents the antithesis, corruption, madness, and the ultimate freedom that comes from abandoning all restraint and sanity. Chaos is both a concept and a tangible force in Warhammer 40,000. At its heart lies the warp, that parallel dimension we've mentioned several times. The warp is not simply alternate space. It's a realm of pure psychic energy where thoughts and emotions take on substance, where the barrier between imagination and reality dissolves. And within the roiling madness of the warp, fed by the emotions of sentient beings throughout the galaxy, 4 great gods have crystallized into terrible consciousness. These are the Chaos Gods, also called the Ruinous Powers or the Dark Gods. Each embodies fundamental aspects of sentient emotion. Each has grown strong on the psychic emanations of war, suffering, and excess that have plagued the galaxy for millions of years. They are Khorne, Nurgle, Tzeentch, and Slaanesh, and each represents both the most primal drives of intelligent species and the horrifying extremes to which those drives can be taken. Let's begin with Khorne, the Blood God, the Lord of Skulls, the embodiment of rage and violence. Khorne sits upon a throne constructed from the skulls of countless trillions, in a realm where blood flows like rivers, and the only law is strength. He feeds on violence, on murder, on warfare in all its forms. Every drop of blood spilled in anger strengthens him. Every death in battle is an offering at his altar. Khorne represents the primal fury that lives within all sentient beings, the rage that drives soldiers to fight, the anger at injustice, the bloodlust of combat. In its purest form, this fury can be a force for justice, the righteous anger that refuses to accept evil unopposed. But Khorne is this fury stripped of all restraint, magnified to cosmic proportions. His followers care nothing for justice or honor in any meaningful sense. They kill because killing is its own purpose, because the act of taking a life is the highest sacrament. The Blood God has a famous saying that illustrates his philosophy perfectly. Blood for the Blood God, skulls for the Skull Throne. It doesn't matter whose blood, whose skulls. Khorne cares not from whence the blood flows, only that it does. A Khorne worshipper killing their allies is just as pleasing to the god as them killing enemies. Violence feeds violence in an eternal cycle. Warriors dedicated to Khorne are berserkers in the truest sense. They charge into battle with no thought for tactics or survival, seeking only to kill and kill until finally they are killed in turn. They forsake all psychic powers, which Khorne considers the weapons of cowards, and rely purely on physical might and martial prowess. Their war cry echoes across 1,000 battlefields, and they know neither fear nor mercy. Yet Khorne also embodies martial honor and the warrior's code, though in twisted form. He despises the weak who cannot defend themselves, considers those who attack the helpless as beneath contempt. He rewards the strong who defeat worthy opponents in fair combat. This aspect of the Blood God attracts some who begin by seeking to become ultimate warriors, only to find themselves sliding into bloodlust and madness. Next comes Nurgle, the Plague Father, the Lord of Decay, god of disease and death, and the entropic rot that claims all living things eventually. Where Khorne is violent rage, Nurgle is insidious corruption. His realm in the warp is a festering garden where diseases bloom like flowers, where every form of pestilence known and unknown festers and grows. Nurgle's domain is not just disease, but decay in all its forms, physical, moral, spiritual. He represents the inevitable entropy that waits for everything, the slow breakdown of order into chaos, the certainty of death. But paradoxically, Nurgle also embodies acceptance and even a twisted form of life. His followers call him Grandfather Nurgle, speak of his love for them, describe how his gifts free them from pain and fear. You see, those who accept Nurgle's plagues stop suffering from them. The diseases ravaging their bodies become comfortable, even pleasurable. They lose their fear of death because death is simply another change, another stage in an endless cycle of decay and renewal. Nurgle's followers are among the most content of all chaos worshippers, precisely because they have accepted the inevitability of entropy and found peace in despair. The appearance of Nurgle's servants reflects their patron's nature. Their bodies are rotting, covered in sores and boils, home to countless diseases. Yet they feel no pain, or rather they've learned to find joy in sensations that would horrify the uninfected. They spread pestilence wherever they go, not out of malice, but from a genuine desire to share Grandfather Nurgle's blessings with those still suffering from the delusion of health. Nurgle's philosophy is especially insidious because it offers genuine comfort to the hopeless. When you're dying of plague, when everything you love has been taken by disease, when despair is all that remains, Nurgle whispers that you can stop fighting, that acceptance brings peace. And for many in the grim darkness of the 41st millennium, that temptation is powerful indeed. Third among the chaos gods is Tzeentch, the changer of ways, the architect of fate, embodiment of change, mutation, magic, and the pursuit of knowledge at any cost. Where Nurgle is stagnation and acceptance, Tzeentch is constant transformation and ambition. His domain in the warp is a crystalline impossibility where geometry defies comprehension, where nothing ever stays the same from one moment to the next. Tzeentch feeds on hope, on ambition, on the desire for change, and the pursuit of forbidden knowledge. Every time someone schemes to advance their position, every time a researcher pushes beyond ethical boundaries in pursuit of discovery, every time a person looks at their circumstances and dreams of something better, Tzeentch grows stronger. The architect of fate is the most enigmatic of the chaos gods because his very nature is contradictory. He schemes endlessly, weaving plots within plots within plots, orchestrating events across millennia. Yet, it's unclear if he actually desires any particular outcome. Tzeentch delights in change itself, in the twisting of fate, in the moment when carefully laid plans either come to fruition or collapse. He is both the gambler and the game, both the chessmaster and the board. Followers of Tzeentch are sorcerers, scholars, politicians, anyone who seeks power through knowledge or manipulation rather than direct force. They often believe they can control the power they're tapping into, that they can make deals with Tzeentch while maintaining their free will. They're almost always wrong. Tzeentch grants power freely, but every gift is a trap, every blessing a curse. His followers find themselves mutating, their bodies changing in accordance with their patron's nature until they barely resemble what they once were. The god of change embodies humanity's drive for progress, for understanding, for improvement. But taken to Tzeentch's extreme, this becomes an insatiable hunger for transformation, regardless of cost. Knowledge pursued until sanity shatters, change for its own sake, with no thought for what's being lost. Finally, there is Slaanesh, the Dark Prince, the youngest god, embodiment of excess, pleasure, pain, and the pursuit of perfection. Slaanesh was born in the most recent cosmic cataclysm, the fall of the Elder, when that ancient species' pursuit of hedonism reached such extremes that their collective psychic emanations crystallized into a new god. Slaanesh represents the search for sensation, for experience, for perfection in all its forms. This can begin innocently enough, an artist seeking to create the perfect painting, a warrior training to achieve flawless technique, anyone pursuing excellence in their chosen field. But Slaanesh is excess without end. The insatiable hunger for more intense experiences, the descent into depravity when normal sensations no longer satisfy. The Prince of Pleasure is perhaps the most seductive of the chaos gods, because the path of temptation is so gradual. It begins with the legitimate desire to excel, to experience joy, to live life fully. But Slanesh's nature is that nothing is ever enough. The perfect painting must be surpassed by one even more perfect. The warrior's technique must be refined beyond all sanity. Pleasure becomes decadence, becomes depravity, becomes horror, and each step seems reasonable until suddenly you've crossed lines you never thought you'd approach. Slanesh's followers are artists and aesthetes corrupted into monsters, their pursuit of perfection and sensation twisted into obscene rituals. They seek ever more extreme experiences because nothing less can satisfy anymore. Pain and pleasure merge in their perception until they become indistinguishable. They create works of terrible beauty, fight with inhuman grace, and seduce others to their patron service with promises of experiences beyond mortal ken. The four chaos gods are simultaneously individual entities and aspects of a greater whole. They embody different facets of chaos itself, different extremes of sentient emotion, and they hate each other with passion that mirrors their nature. Khorne and Slanesh are diametrically opposed, the straightforward violence of the blood god, disgusted by the prince's excessive refinement. Nurgle and Tzeentch stand opposite, the stagnation of decay versus the frenzy of change. Yet they will sometimes cooperate when it serves their purposes, particularly when facing the Emperor, whom all four recognize as their greatest enemy. The Emperor's order, his attempt to impose rationality on the cosmos, his secular imperial truth that denies the god's existence, all of this is anathema to chaos. The Horus heresy was, at its core, the chaos god's greatest gambit to destroy the Emperor and claim the galaxy. Chaos has its mortal servants beyond individual worshippers. The Chaos Space Marines are perhaps the most terrifying. These are Space Marines who turned traitor during the Horus heresy, warriors who were once humanity's greatest defenders, but who now fight to tear down everything they once protected. 10,000 years in the warp have changed them, twisted their bodies and minds, but they retain all their skill and much of their intelligence. These traitors are organized into war bands and legions, though their structure is far more fractured than loyal Space Marine chapters. Some worship specific chaos gods and bear the marks of their patrons. Khorne's followers, the Khornate berserkers, charge into battle as mindless engines of slaughter. Nurgle's plague marines are walking plagues encased in rotting power armor. Tzeentch's sorcerers command impossible magics. Slanesh's warriors seek the perfect kill, the most exquisite sensation of combat. Other Chaos Space Marines worship chaos undivided, serving all four gods without dedicating themselves to one. They seek power for its own sake, using whatever aspects of chaos grant them advantage. And some few claim to use chaos as a tool while maintaining their free will, though whether this is actually possible or merely delusion is debatable. Chaos also claims millions of human cultists across the Imperium. On countless worlds, hidden cells worship the dark gods, conducting obscene rituals in secret, waiting for the day when they can rise up and help overthrow the imperial order. Some are born into these cults, raised from childhood to worship powers they barely understand. Others turn to chaos out of desperation, anger at the Imperium's brutality, or simply the human capacity for corruption. The Inquisition, particularly its Ordo Malleus branch, exists primarily to fight chaos in all its forms. Inquisitors hunt cultists, investigate signs of corruption, and when necessary, destroy entire worlds rather than let chaos infections spread. It's a grim calculus. But in a universe where a single corrupted psyker can tear a hole in reality and allow demons to pour through, extreme measures become necessary. What makes chaos so dangerous is that it offers genuine power. It's not merely temptation with false promises. Those who serve the chaos gods do receive real gifts, real strength, real knowledge. The cost is their humanity, their sanity, their souls, but the power is authentic. This makes chaos almost impossible to fight ideologically. You can't simply tell people that the dark gods offer nothing, because that's demonstrably false. The Imperium's answer is to deny that choice entirely. Knowledge of chaos is restricted, hidden from the masses. Most Imperial citizens live their entire lives without knowing the true nature of the warp or the existence of the chaos gods. They're told that demons are merely xenos with strange powers, that mutation is punishment for sin, that faith alone protects. This ignorance is itself a shield, because you cannot be tempted by what you don't know exists. Yet knowledge can never be completely suppressed. There are always those who discover forbidden truths, who find ancient texts, who are contacted by demonic entities. And some of those will inevitably fall, adding to chaos's endless armies. The Xenos threats humanity in the 41st millennium does not face only itself and its own corruption. The galaxy teems with alien life, and almost all of it is hostile to human survival. The Imperium's xenophobia, its doctrine that all aliens exist only to be exterminated, might seem cruel and close-minded, but it's born from 10,000 years of conflict with species that offer humanity nothing but annihilation. Let's begin with the orcs, because in many ways they're the simplest to understand, while also being perhaps the most dangerous in aggregate. Orcs are green-skinned humanoids who exist purely for war. They don't fight for territory, resources, or ideology. They fight because fighting is fun. An orc's idea of paradise is an endless battle where they can test themselves against the strongest enemies, and death in combat is simply the end of a good day's work. Orcs are not stupid, despite what their crude appearance and culture might suggest. They possess an innate understanding of technology that allows them to build weapons and vehicles from scrap. These contraptions shouldn't work according to any rational laws of physics, held together with prayers and spit and sheer stubborn belief. But orcs have a latent psychic field that affects reality around them. If enough orcs believe something works, it does. Red vehicles go faster because orcs know red things are fast. Guns shoot because orcs expect them to. This makes them both unpredictable and incredibly dangerous. Orc society is brutally simple. The biggest orc is in charge until a bigger orc beats him. These leaders, called war bosses, gather followers through displays of strength and successful battles. As an orc fights and survives, it literally grows larger, eventually becoming massive enough to command respect through size alone. The largest orcs can tower over even space marines. When a particularly large and successful war boss arises, orcs from across entire sectors might gather under their leadership in what's called a great rallying war cry and battle surge. These massive campaigns, sometimes billions of orcs strong, sweep across star systems, leaving devastation in their wake. They're not trying to conquer territory in any meaningful sense. They're looking for good fights, and they'll keep fighting until they're all dead or until they run out of enemies. The Imperium has fought orcs for 10,000 years, and will likely fight them for 10,000 more. Orcs reproduce through spores that are released when they die, meaning that anywhere orcs have been, more orcs will eventually grow. They're a literally self-perpetuating threat that can never be fully eliminated, only beaten back temporarily before they rise again. Very different from the cheerful brutality of orcs are the Tyranids, a threat so alien that communication is impossible and negotiation inconceivable. The Tyranids are an extragalactic species, a biological hive mind that has traveled across the void between galaxies and now descends upon the Milky Way in vast hive fleets. Tyranids don't conquer worlds, they consume them, utterly and completely. The hive fleet approaches a planet and begins seeding the atmosphere with spores. These spores alter the environment, making it hostile to native life while nurturing Tyranid organisms. Meanwhile, the main invasion begins, bioships disgorging countless creatures bred for specific combat roles. Every Tyranid, from the smallest ripper to the largest biotitan, is a weapon designed and grown for its purpose. The hive mind adapts in real time, analyzing how defenders fight and spawning new organisms to counter their tactics. Tyranids face space marines in power armor, The next wave includes creatures with armor-piercing claws. Defenders use long-range artillery. The hive mind produces flying organisms or burrowing ones to close the distance. When a world falls to the Tyranids, massive towers, called capillary towers, rise from the ground. These organs pump the planet's biomass, literally dissolving all organic matter and sucking it up into the fleet above. The seas are drained, forests consumed, even the bacteria in the soil are harvested. When the Tyranids leave, nothing remains but a barren rock, stripped of anything that could sustain life. The hive fleets that have entered the galaxy so far, designated by the Imperium with names like Behemoth, Kraken, and Leviathan, are merely tendrils of the greater swarm. Nobody knows how large the main Tyranid force is, how many more fleets are traveling through the void, how many other galaxies they've already consumed. The Tyranids might be infinite, and they're heading straight for the galaxy's most populated regions. Against the living swarm of the Tyranids and the endless warfare of the Orcs, the Necrons represent something ancient and cold and utterly implacable. The Necrons are the oldest intelligent species in the galaxy, a race that transferred their consciousness from flesh to immortal metal bodies 60 million years ago in a bid to survive a terrible plague. But this transference came at a terrible cost. The Necrons made their bargain with star gods called the Khitan, and these entities stripped away the Necrons' souls in the process of transfer. What remains are cold intelligences trapped in living metal, eternally existing, but never truly alive. Most Necrons are mindless automatons, their personalities completely erased. But some retained their consciousness, and these lords and overlords remember an age when their empire spanned the galaxy. The Necrons went into hibernation as their empire collapsed, their tomb worlds sleeping beneath the surface of countless planets. Now they're awakening to find the galaxy claimed by upstart species who don't remember or respect the Necron dynasty's ancient rights. The Necrons want their empire back, and they have the technology to reclaim it. Necron technology is so advanced that it appears magical. Their weapons strip molecules apart. Their shields phase through solid matter. Their ships traverse the galaxy through an interdimensional labyrinth. Necron warriors who are destroyed simply teleport back to their tomb worlds to be repaired and redeployed. Killing a Necron is only temporary. Destroying them permanently requires exotic weapons or absolute annihilation of their reconstruction facilities. Different from the Necrons' cold perfection are the Ildari, known more commonly as Eldar, the dying remnants of an empire that once ruled the galaxy. The Eldar are ancient, sophisticated, psychically powerful, and desperately trying to avoid extinction. They view humanity as crude barbarians stumbling through the ruins of Eldar glory, and they're not entirely wrong. The Eldar Empire fell 10,000 years ago in an event called the Fall, when their society's descent into hedonistic excess became so extreme that it gave birth to Slaanesh, the chaos god of excess. The psychic shockwave of Slaanesh's birth killed trillions of Eldar instantly and shattered their civilization. Worse, Slaanesh hungers specifically for Eldar souls. When an Eldar dies, if their soul is not protected, Slaanesh claims it for an eternity of torment. The surviving Eldar are split into several factions. The Craft World. Eldar live on massive world ships that travel the galaxy, their societies disciplined and restrained to avoid the excesses that doomed their ancestors. Each Eldar walks a specific path in life, dedicating themselves completely to a role, whether warrior, artisan, or seer. When they die, their souls are captured in special stones called Waystones, protecting them from Slaanesh's hunger. The Drukhari, or Dark Eldar, took a different approach. They fled into the Webway and established the Dark City of Komorragh in that realm of twisted space. These Eldar embrace the cruelty and sadism of their ancestors. but they've learned to sustain themselves by torturing others and feeding on the psychic pain this generates. They launch raids from the webway onto real space, stealing victims to drag back to Komarag for tortures that defy description. The Tau are the youngest major species, a race that only achieved interstellar travel in the past few thousand years. Where other species fight for survival or dominance, the Tau believe in something they call the greater good, a philosophy that all species can work together for mutual benefit under Tau guidance. This makes the Tau unique in 40K. They're genuinely idealistic, actually trying to create a better society. They incorporate other species into their empire as equals, judged by their contribution rather than their origin. Human worlds that have joined the Tau often find life significantly better than it was under Imperial rule. The Tau are competent, organized, and sincere in their beliefs. But they're also naive, at least from the Imperium's perspective. The Tau have little understanding of chaos and the threats it poses. Their empire is tiny compared to the Imperium, a mere handful of systems. They haven't faced the scale of horror that the Imperium deals with daily, and there are hints that their beloved greater good isn't as voluntary as it seems, that subtle mind control might play a role in maintaining social harmony. The Tau fight with advanced technology and coordinated tactics. Their battle suits bristle with powerful weapons, their drones provide support, their tactics emphasize ranged combat over melee. They're dangerous opponents despite their small numbers and recent arrival on the galactic stage. Each of these species, and countless others besides, poses an existential threat to humanity. The Imperium's xenophobia isn't merely prejudice. It's the accumulated wisdom of 10,000 years learning that most aliens encountered want humanity dead or enslaved. Are there exceptions? Almost certainly. But the Imperium can't afford to take that risk. One diplomatic mission to a supposedly peaceful species could end with a world subverted from within, and the Imperium has learned to assume the worst. This creates tragic situations where peaceful contact might have been possible, but the Imperium's shoot-first policy ensures conflict. The few alliances that do form, usually against mutual threats like tyrannids or chaos, are temporary and fragile. In the grim darkness of the far future, there are no friends among the stars, only enemies and enemies of enemies. The Adeptus Astartes, humanity's greatest warriors. Of all the Imperium's military forces, none inspire more awe or terror than the Space Marines, officially known as the Adeptus Astartes. These are not merely soldiers. They are transhuman warriors, genetically enhanced far beyond normal human capabilities, psychologically conditioned to know no fear, and armed with the finest weapons and armor the Imperium can provide. Creating a Space Marine is a brutal process that few survive. It begins with selection. Chapters recruit from specific worlds, often death worlds where simply surviving childhood proves strength and determination. The trials to even be considered can kill aspirants. Those who survive initial testing begin a transformation that will take years and permanently alter them. A Space Marine candidate receives 19 additional organs, each one genetically engineered to enhance some aspect of his physiology. A second heart for redundancy and increased blood flow, an extra lung for breathing toxic atmospheres, a preomnor stomach that can digest almost anything and neutralize poisons, an os modular that strengthens bones to resist incredible force, a biscopia that increases muscle mass far beyond human norms. But the most important implant is the gene seed, the genetic template derived from one of the Primarchs. This carries the genetic legacy of the chapter's founding father, and it's what makes a Space Marine more than just a very tough human. The gene seed alters the recruit's DNA, initiating transformations that will eventually result in a warrior standing 8 feet tall, capable of surviving injuries that would kill any normal human, able to spit acid hibernate for centuries if necessary, and fight for days without rest. The process isn't just physical. Space Marines undergo intense psychological conditioning, hypnotherapy that implants absolute loyalty to the Emperor and their chapter. They learn the histories and doctrines of their chapter, study tactics and strategy, master the use of countless weapons. By the time the process is complete, usually when the recruit is in his late teens, he is no longer fully human, but something beyond. Space Marines are organized into chapters, autonomous armies of roughly 1,000 warriors each. There are approximately 1,000 chapters in existence, though the exact number fluctuates as some chapters are destroyed and new ones are founded. Each chapter has its own heraldry, traditions, and specializations, but most follow the organizational structure laid out in an ancient text called the Codex Astartes. The Codex was written by Rabut Guilliman, Primarch of the Ultramarines, after the Horus Heresy. It codifies virtually every aspect of Space Marine warfare and organization. A Codex-compliant chapter consists of 10 companies of 100 Marines each. The first company contains the veterans, clad in the heaviest Terminator armor. Companies 2 through 5 are battle companies, combined arms forces ready for any mission. Companies 6 through 9 are reserve formations specializing in specific combat roles. The 10th company trains scouts, recruits, learning their craft before receiving full power armor. Not all chapters follow the Codex strictly. The Space Wolves maintain their traditional organization of great companies led by Wolf Lords. The Black Templars have no fixed base and are always crusading, their numbers exceeding Codex limits. The Dark Angels have secret inner circles with their own agendas. But even chapters that deviate respect the Codex's tactical wisdom. Each chapter claims descent from one of the 9 loyalist Primarchs who stood with the Emperor during the heresy. The Ultramarines and their successors, descended from Guilliman, are the most numerous. The Blood Angels and their successors carry a curse in their gene seed, a berserker rage inherited from their Primarch. The Space Wolves are the most feral, their gene seed causing animalistic mutations. The Dark Angels harbor a terrible secret about fallen members of their legion who turned traitor. The Salamanders are noted for their compassion and for actually caring about civilian casualties, unusual among Space Marines. Space Marines are deliberately set apart from ordinary humanity. They live in fortress monasteries on their chapter's home world, isolated from civilian populations. They recruit only males, as the gene seed is keyed to male physiology and doesn't work in females. They have no families, no lives outside the chapter. Their brothers are their only family, their chapter's glory, their only ambition, death in battle, their expected fate. This isolation serves a purpose beyond just maintaining martial focus. Space Marines are tools, weapons aimed at the Emperor's enemies. They're not meant to rule or to sympathize too much with those they protect. The separation ensures they remain loyal to their purpose, rather than developing attachments that might compromise their effectiveness. Power armor, the iconic sealed suit that Space Marines wear into battle, is itself a wonder of technology. Each suit interfaces directly with the Marine's implants, becoming an extension of his body rather than merely equipment he wears. The armor enhances his already superhuman strength, protects him from small arms fire, and even heavy weapons to some degree, contains systems for operating in vacuum or toxic environments, and houses targeting systems and communications gear. The armor is also deeply sacred to its wearer. Many suits are centuries old, their machine spirits honored and maintained through ritual as much as maintenance. A Marine will spend hours cleaning and blessing his armor before battle, knowing that this gear has protected countless warriors before him and will hopefully protect many after he falls. Space Marine weapons are similarly impressive. Bolters, their standard firearm, fire gyrojet projectiles that penetrate armor before exploding, tearing the target apart from within. Power weapons have fields of energy running along their edges, capable of cutting through almost any material. Plasma weapons superheat hydrogen into a miniature sun and launch it at enemies, and these are just the standard issue. Veterans and specialists carry rarer weapons, artifacts of power whose like can no longer be manufactured. The combat effectiveness of Space Marines is difficult to overstate. A single Marine is capable of fighting off dozens of normal soldiers. A squad can hold off an army. A company deployment can turn the tide of a planetary war. There are countless legends of individual Marines performing feats that seem impossible, holding breach doors closed against thousands of enemies, fighting for days without support, taking wounds that should be instantly fatal and continuing to fight. But Space Marines are not invincible. They can be killed through sufficient force, overwhelmed by sheer numbers, or brought down by weapons specifically designed to penetrate their armor. The most dangerous enemies, other Space Marines or Xenos champions or greater demons, can match them blow for blow. And ultimately, there are only about 1 million Space Marines total across all chapters. In a galaxy with quadrillions of humans and countless threats, the Space Marines are spread impossibly thin. This is why Space Marines are used as shock troops and special forces rather than line infantry. They deploy for specific missions where their superior capabilities are essential, assassinating enemy leaders, destroying crucial fortifications, spearheading invasions. Then they withdraw and move to the next crisis point, leaving ordinary forces to garrison and hold what they've taken. The relationship between Space Marines and normal humans is complex. To civilians, Space Marines are legends, angels of death descending from the sky to save them from Xenos or heretics. They're barely human anymore. More like divine servants of the Emperor made manifest. Most people will never see a Space Marine in person, and those who do often struggle to process what they're witnessing. To the Space Marines themselves, ordinary humans are both charges to protect and beings so far beneath them in capability that they barely register as the same species. Marines feel duty toward humanity, but rarely genuine kinship. They're aware that their purpose is to protect the Imperium, but individual civilians are like insects, too numerous and short-lived to form connections with. Recently, a new type of Space Marine has been introduced. Primaris Space Marines, created through enhanced techniques and bearing even greater enhancements than traditional firstborn Marines, stand taller, fight harder, and represent the future of the Adeptus Astartes. Some chapters welcomed these new brothers eagerly. Others viewed them with suspicion, concerned about diluting traditions that stretch back 10,000 years. But as the Imperium faces ever greater threats, the Primaris represent hope that humanity's defenders can evolve to meet the challenges ahead. The Space Marines embody everything about Warhammer 40,000 in concentrated form. They're heroes, genuinely fighting to protect humanity from horrors that would destroy it. But they're also products of a system that treats human life as currency, warriors who rarely question the brutal regime they serve. They save millions, yet kill thousands without hesitation if those people are deemed heretics or obstacles. They're both the best of humanity and the most inhuman soldiers in the galaxy. The Imperial Guard and humanity's other defenders. If Space Marines are the Imperium's scalpel, the Astra Militarum, formerly known as the Imperial Guard, is its sledgehammer. These are the ordinary soldiers of the Imperium, billions upon billions of men and women who face the galaxy's horrors armed with nothing but lasguns, faith, and desperate courage. Every world in the Imperium that can must provide tithes of soldiers to the Guard. Some worlds send regiments numbering in the millions. Others might only provide a few thousand specialists. But across the Imperium, the tithes add up to the single largest military force in galactic history. Trillions of guardsmen fight on countless battlefields, and while individual soldiers might be easily killed, the Guard as a whole is unstoppable, simply through weight of numbers. Guard regiments vary enormously based on their world of origin. Cadian shock troops, from a fortress world that stood for 10,000 years against chaos invasions from the Eye of Terror, are professional soldiers renowned for their discipline and expertise. Katakan jungle fighters are survivalists from a death world so hostile that simply growing up there makes them dangerous close combat specialists. Valhallan ice warriors are trained to operate in frozen wastelands. Steel Legion tank crews from Armageddon are masters of armored warfare. What makes the Guards' position tragic is that they're expected to face the same enemies as Space Marines, but with vastly inferior equipment and training. A Guardsman's lasgun can barely scratch a Space Marine's armor, yet they're ordered to advance against Chaos Space Marines anyway. Their standard issue flak armor is called flak because it protects against shrapnel, not because it'll stop bolter shells. Yet still they fight, because the alternative is to let the Imperium fall. The Guards' doctrine is based on overwhelming firepower and mass assault. 1,000,000 soldiers might die to take a single objective, but if that objective's capture wins the war, the Imperium considers it acceptable. Individual Guardsmen are trained to think of themselves as expendable, just one more bullet in the Emperor's gun. Officers are expected to maintain discipline even as their forces are ground to dust, because showing weakness might cause a general rout. But the Guard isn't just about human waves crashing against enemy positions. They field armor and artillery that, while less sophisticated than Xenos tech, is produced in quantities that compensate. Lemon Russ battle tanks by the thousands advance in armored columns. Basilisk artillery pieces reduce enemy positions to craters from miles away. Valkyrie gunships provide air support. The Guard might not have the quality of other forces, but quantity has a quality all its own. Leadership in the Guard is often brutal. Commissars attached to regiments have authority to execute any soldier for cowardice or heresy, and they use this authority liberally to maintain discipline. Officers know that their soldiers are terrified, that they have every reason to break and run, and that only harsh measures keep them fighting. Yet many Guard officers genuinely care for their troops, trying to minimize casualties while still accomplishing their missions. Life for a Guardsman is often short and always hard. They're torn from their homeworlds and sent to fight on alien planets light years away. They might never see home again, as tours of duty can last decades, and by the time they return, everyone they knew has aged or died while they've traveled through the warp where time flows strangely. Many Guardsmen retire to the worlds they helped conquer, too changed by war to reintegrate into civilian life. The Adepta Sororitas, also called the Sisters of Battle, represent a different aspect of the Imperium's military strength. These are the militant arm of the ecclesiarchy, women trained from childhood in faith and warfare. While they lack the genetic enhancements of Space Marines, Sisters are among the most elite human soldiers in the Imperium, armed with the best weapons and clad in power armor nearly equal to that of the Astartes. What makes the Sisters terrifying to the Imperium's enemies is their absolute, unshakable faith. They believe with perfect certainty in the Emperor's divinity, in their divine purpose, in the righteousness of their cause. This faith manifests as literal miracles, with particularly faithful Sisters shrugging off wounds that should be fatal or channeling the Emperor's power to smite their foes. Doubt is unknown to them, fear burned away by the fire of their devotion. The Inquisition stands apart from conventional military forces, answering to no one but the Emperor himself. Inquisitors are granted almost unlimited authority to investigate threats to the Imperium and take whatever action they deem necessary. An Inquisitor can commandeer entire armies, destroy worlds, execute governors, all without needing approval from higher authority. The Inquisition is divided into 3 major branches, or Ordos. The Ordo Hereticus hunts heretics and witches within the Imperium, rooting out chaos cults and ensuring the ecclesiarchy doesn't overstep its authority. The Ordo Xenos deals with alien threats, studying Xenos species to understand their weaknesses and eliminating Xenos infiltration. The Ordo Malleus specializes in combating demons and chaos itself, wielding knowledge forbidden to all others in the pursuit of protecting humanity from its most insidious foe. Inquisitors work mostly in secret, accompanied by small retinues of specialists rather than armies. They investigate quietly, gather evidence, and only when certain do they reveal themselves and take action. But when an Inquisitor does act, the consequences can be devastating. Exterminatus. The complete destruction of a world's biosphere is a tool Inquisitors can deploy if they judge a world too corrupted to save. The Adeptus Mechanicus, the tech priests of Mars, are technically separate from the Imperium proper, maintaining independence through ancient treaty. They worship the machine god, believe that knowledge is sacred, and guard the Imperium's technological secrets jealously. The Mechanicus provides the Imperium with virtually all its advanced technology, maintains the equipment of other branches, and fields their own armies of cyborg soldiers and war machines. Tech priests replace their flesh with mechanical augmentations over time, seeing biological bodies as weak and inefficient. Senior members of the Mechanicus are more machine than human, their remaining organic components kept alive through life support systems. They believe that the flesh is weak and the machine is pure, and many seek to eventually become entirely mechanical. The Navy controls the Imperium's void fleets, massive warships that battle above worlds and transport armies between stars. Naval vessels are kilometers long, house crews numbering in the tens of thousands, and mount weapons that can devastate continents. Ship-to-ship combat is brutal, with vessels hammering each other with broadsides of macro cannons and lance batteries until one breaks apart or is boarded by troops teleporting directly onto its bridge. All these forces, from the lowliest guardsman to the mightiest Inquisitor, serve the same Imperium and fight the same enemies. But they often work at cross purposes, hampered by bureaucracy, conflicting orders, and simple communication failures. The Imperium's military might is vast beyond measure, yet it's often wielded inefficiently, like a giant swinging blindly at enemies darting around its legs. The Horus Heresy, the Imperium's defining tragedy. To understand the Imperium of the 41st Millennium, to truly grasp why it is the way it is, you must understand the Horus Heresy. This civil war, fought 10,000 years ago, shaped everything that came after. It was the moment when humanity's brightest hope turned to ash, when brothers slew brothers, when the dream of a united, rational humanity died screaming. The story begins at the height of the Great Crusade, when the Emperor had named Horus Lupercal as War Master. Horus was, by most accounts, the greatest of the Primarchs. Charismatic, brilliant in warfare and diplomacy, beloved by his brothers and the Emperor alike. If anyone could be trusted with command of all Imperial forces, it was Horus. But something went terribly wrong on the moon of Davin. During what should have been a routine compliance action, Horus was wounded by a weapon tainted by chaos. As his life ebbed away, his trusted advisors, themselves secretly corrupted, brought him to a temple where dark rituals could heal him. But the cure was worse than any disease. In that temple, the Chaos Gods showed Horus visions. They showed him a future where the Emperor abandoned the legions and ruled from terror as a god, all credit for the Great Crusade given to the Emperor while the Primarchs were forgotten. The visions were lies, distortions of possible futures mixed with truths designed to wound, but they worked. Horus emerged from his healing, consumed by bitterness, convinced that his father had betrayed him, ready to listen to Chaos's whispers. The corruption spread carefully at first. Horus reached out to his brother Primarchs, testing their loyalty, speaking words of doubt about the Emperor's plans. Some he found already corrupted, like Lorgar of the Word-Bearers, who had secretly worshipped Chaos for decades. Others he won over through their own grievances against the Emperor and his policies. Eventually, 9 legions turned traitor. Horus's own sons of Horus, the Iron Warriors, bitter at being assigned garrison duties while others won glory. The Night Lords, whose brutal tactics had already put them at odds with Imperial principles. The World Eaters, whose Primarch Angron had been surgically turned into a rage machine. The Death Guard, following their Primarch Mortarion into darkness. The Thousand Suns, persecuted for their psychic powers. The Word-Bearers, who saw chaos as the truth behind reality. The Emperor's children, whose pursuit of perfection led them to Slanesh, and the Alpha Legion, whose motives remain murky to this day. The heresy began in earnest at Istvan III, where Horus lured those space marines in the traitor legions who were still loyal to the Emperor and bombarded them from orbit with virus weapons. Millions of loyalists died in minutes, their bodies melting as the life-eater virus consumed all organic matter. Those who survived the initial bombardment, taking shelter in sealed positions, were hunted down by traitor forces in bitter combat. At Istvan V came the drop site massacre, where loyalist legions attempting to end the rebellion were ambushed. The Iron Hands, Salamanders, and Raven Guard landed to assault Horus's position, supported by what they thought were loyal reinforcements. But the Iron Warriors, Night Lords, Alpha Legion, and Word-Bearers revealed their treachery at the crucial moment, attacking the loyalists from behind. Entire legions were nearly destroyed in a single day of slaughter. The heresy engulfed the galaxy. Legions that had been brothers for 2 centuries fought each other with hatred born of betrayal. Worlds that had been brought into compliance were torn apart as different factions chose sides. Mars itself split in civil war as the Mechanicus fractured, with the Fabricator General joining Horus and much of Mars's forges turning to producing weapons for the traitors. Some of the loyalist legions never reached Terra to defend it. The Ultramarines, the largest legion, were engaged at Calth in a massive conflict with the Word-Bearers. Guilliman's forces survived, but were pinned down for years. The Blood Angels were lured to a trap at Cygnus Prime, barely escaping demonic ambush. The Space Wolves were sent to censure Magnus the Red for sorcery, only to find themselves fighting the Thousand Suns on Prospero and taking terrible casualties. The Dark Angels fleet engaged the traitor Night Lords, but their Primarch Lion L. Johnson could never quite bring the full weight of his legion to bear. The White Scars were delayed by Alpha Legion manipulation and internal dissent within their own ranks. These forces would eventually fight for the Imperium, but too late to help defend Terra itself. As the traitor forces advanced toward the Sol system, loyalists fortified worlds along the way. Beta Garmon became the site of one of the largest battles in human history, with billions dying as both sides threw everything they had into controlling this strategic location. The space lanes ran with blood and wreckage. Meanwhile, on Terra, Rogel Dawn of the Imperial Fists fortified the Sol system with everything the Imperium could spare. Orbital stations were armed to the teeth. The palace itself became a fortress, its walls reinforced until they could withstand even Titan weapons. The entire population was mobilized for war, building defenses, producing ammunition, preparing to fight a siege that might last years. The siege of Terra, when it came, was apocalypse. Traitor Titan legions battled loyalist Titans in the ruins of the palace districts. Millions of traitors poured through breaches in the walls, only to be met by desperate defenders. The Space Wolves and White Scars finally arrived to reinforce the defenders, but traitor numbers seemed endless. The traitors had changed during their time under Chaos's influence. Many had become possessed by demons or mutated into monsters barely recognizable as having once been human. They brought horrors with them. Demon engines, corrupted titans, machines that screamed with stolen souls. The siege became not just a battle, but a descent into madness as reality itself warped under Chaos's influence. Finally, as the defenders' strength waned, something unexpected happened. Horus lowered the void shields on his flagship, the Vengeful Spirit. He was taunting the Emperor, offering a chance for direct confrontation. The Emperor, knowing this might be a trap but seeing no other option, teleported aboard with a strike force, his Praetorian Rogel Dawn, his Custodian Commander, and several others. The teleportation scattered the force across the massive ship. Some were lost in the warp. Some fought running battles through corridors of nightmare. But the Emperor made his way to the throne room where Horus waited. There, father and son fought their final battle. The accounts of this duel have been distorted by time and propaganda, but certain things are clear. The emperor was reluctant to kill Horus, still hoping his son could be redeemed. Horus, fully corrupted by all four chaos gods, held no such reservations. The War Master struck the emperor terrible blows, wounds that no mortal could survive. One version of the story says that a single loyalist, either a custodian or perhaps a simple soldier, intervened to protect the emperor and was annihilated by Horus. Seeing this casual destruction of one who had no hope of victory but fought anyway, the emperor finally understood that Horus was truly lost. Another version has the emperor simply reaching the limit of what he could endure while holding back. Either way, the emperor finally unleashed his full power, not to merely kill Horus, but to completely obliterate his soul, burning it from existence so thoroughly that not even the chaos gods could put it back together. The burst of power left Horus's body an empty husk and spent the last of the emperor's strength. When Dawn and the others finally reached the throne room, they found the emperor barely alive, Horus's body destroyed, and the traitor fleet beginning to flee. Without their war master, faced with loyalist reinforcements finally arriving in system, the traitors broke and ran back toward the Eye of Terror. The emperor was brought to the Golden Throne, that device meant to power the webway. Hastily modified by the remaining tech priests, it became a life support system. The emperor's last instructions were to activate it, and for 10,000 years he has remained there, neither truly alive nor dead, his consciousness stretched thin across countless tasks that keep the Imperium functioning. The aftermath of the heresy was grim. Half the Space Marine legions were gone, fled into the Eye of Terror or scattered. Countless worlds were devastated, Mars was torn apart, and the Emperor, who had been guiding humanity directly for 2 centuries, was now only accessible through the indirect means of the Emperor's tarot or psychic communion that few could achieve. Reboot Guilliman, one of the loyalist primarchs, took it upon himself to reorganize the Imperium for survival. His Codex Astartes split the legions into chapters to prevent any one individual from commanding too much military power again. He established much of the bureaucratic structure that would become the High Lords of Terror. Then, his work done, Guilliman was mortally wounded and placed in stasis, where he would remain until recently awakened in the 41st Millennium. The Horus heresy fundamentally changed the Imperium. The Emperor's vision of a secular, rational humanity, guided by science, died with him. The imperial truth was abandoned, replaced by the imperial cult that worshipped the Emperor as divine. Technology became viewed with superstition. The Imperium became xenophobic, paranoid, brutal in ways the Great Crusade never was. Yet in another sense, the heresy saved the Imperium. By splitting military power, by establishing the Inquisition to root out corruption, by teaching the Imperium to always watch for internal threats, the reforms prevented chaos from ever repeating such a comprehensive subversion. The Imperium of the 41st Millennium is nightmarish, but it's also proven capable of surviving 10,000 years of constant war. Perhaps the two are inseparable. The philosophy and themes of Warhammer 40,000. What makes Warhammer 40,000 compelling isn't just the setting's vastness, or the miniatures, or the countless stories told within it. It's the philosophical questions the setting asks, and its refusal to provide easy answers. At its core, 40K asks, what is justified in the name of survival? The Imperium commits atrocities daily. It grinds up lives in industrial quantities. It enforces brutal conformity, destroys any who question its doctrines, treats individual suffering as irrelevant. Yet it faces threats that would destroy humanity entirely if unchecked. So is the Imperium's brutality necessary? Or has it simply become brutality for its own sake? A system perpetuating itself regardless of whether its original justification still applies? The setting doesn't answer. Different stories present different perspectives. Some show the Imperium's cruelty as essential, the only thing keeping humanity alive. Others suggest that the Imperium's methods create as many problems as they solve, that perhaps a gentler approach might work better. The reader is left to decide. This moral ambiguity extends to almost every faction. The Space Marines are noble heroes and indoctrinated fanatics simultaneously. The Eldar are sophisticated and wise, but also arrogant and willing to sacrifice millions of humans to save a single Eldar life. Even chaos isn't purely evil in any simple sense. The Chaos Gods embody fundamental aspects of sentient existence that can't simply be eliminated. The setting also explores what happens when good intentions decay over time. The Emperor set out to save humanity from ignorance and superstition. 10,000 years later, he's worshipped as a god by an Imperium drowning in both. The Space Marines were created as protectors. Now they're often as dangerous to the people they protect as to their enemies. Noble ideals have curdled into dogma enforced at bolter point. Warhammer 40,000's aesthetic is deliberately excessive. Everything is larger than life. Weapons that are practically buildings, battles involving billions, ships the size of cities, character armor that's 50% decoration. This isn't realistic, and it's not meant to be. It's a dark fantasy space opera where everything is pushed to the extreme. The universe is grimdark, not just in tone, but in visual design. All Gothic cathedrals and skulls and Baroque ornamentation. This over-the-top presentation serves a purpose beyond looking cool. It creates a universe that feels mythic, legendary. These aren't just soldiers fighting wars, they're demigods clashing in battles that will be remembered for millennia. The scale makes individual human lives seem insignificant, which is exactly the point. In a galaxy this vast, with stakes this high, individual tragedy barely registers. Yet the best 40K stories zoom in on those individual tragedies anyway. They show us the guardsman who knows he's going to die, but fights anyway because his world is behind him. The Space Marine who remembers what it was like to be human and mourns what he's lost. The Inquisitor who must order exterminatus and live with the knowledge of the billions they killed. By contrasting the cosmic scale with personal stories, the setting achieves genuine emotional impact. The setting also explores faith in ways both positive and negative. Faith can be a source of strength, allowing characters to stand against horrors that would break anyone without such conviction. But faith can also blind, can be used to control, can justify terrible acts. The Imperium runs on faith, but that same faith prevents progress and locks humanity into cycles of violence. Loyalty is another major theme. The bonds between Space Marines, the dedication of guardsmen to their comrades, the absolute faith servants have in the Emperor, these are presented as genuinely admirable. But loyalty can also mean following orders, even when they're wrong, maintaining systems that should change, defending institutions that have become corrupt. When does loyalty become complicity? The setting makes extensive use of body horror and the violation of both physical and spiritual integrity. Chaos corruption doesn't just kill, it transforms, turning people into monsters while often leaving them aware of what's happening. Nurgle's diseases consume bodies from within. Tyrannid absorption is being dissolved alive. Even the Imperium's own servitors are lobotomized criminals or vat-born slaves with machinery grafted onto their bodies. This horror serves to emphasize how dangerous the universe is, how there are fates worse than death. But it also raises questions about the value of humanity's survival, if that survival requires turning people into servitors, or sacrificing psychers to the Golden Throne, or any of the other horrors the Imperium commits as routine. Warhammer 40,000 is often described as satire, and it is. But the satire is layered. It's satirizing fascism, bureaucracy, religious extremism, the military-industrial complex, blind faith, xenophobia, and countless other targets. But it's also aware that its satirical targets are playing with toys of these factions, painting miniatures, enjoying the aesthetic. So the satire has to be subtle enough that people can engage with the setting without feeling preached at. yet clear enough that the setting's darkness doesn't come across as endorsement. The humor in 40K is pitch black when it appears. Orcs are perhaps the most obvious source, their cheerful brutality and belief-powered technology providing comic relief in an otherwise grim setting. But there's dark humor throughout. The bureaucracy so vast that worlds are forgotten due to filing errors. Tech priests performing rituals that are actually just turning things on and off again. The sheer absurdity of some situations. Ultimately, Warhammer 40,000 presents a universe where hope is hard to find, but isn't quite extinguished. Individuals can still make a difference, even if that difference is measured in worlds saved rather than the galaxy transformed. Heroes do exist, even if they're flawed and operating within a system that's deeply broken. The Imperium endures, even though it probably shouldn't, simply because enough people believe it's worth preserving. Starting your journey in the 41st Millennium. So you've learned the basics of this vast, intricate universe. Where do you go from here? How do you dive deeper into the lore, the stories, the hobby that millions of people have embraced? The first thing to understand is that there's no single correct way to engage with Warhammer 40,000. Some people play the tabletop wargame, building and painting armies of miniatures and fighting battles with friends. Others read the countless novels published by Black Library, exploring every corner of the setting through hundreds of stories. Still others engage through video games, of which there are dozens spanning multiple genres. And some people just enjoy the lore itself, reading wikis and watching videos, absorbing the universe without ever rolling dice or buying a model. If you're interested in the miniatures and tabletop game, start small. Games Workshop sells starter sets that include everything needed for 2 people to play, along with simplified rules. Paint sets are available with the basic colors needed to get started. The hobby aspect, building and painting miniatures, is relaxing for many people, a meditative process of bringing these warriors to life. And playing the game itself provides a narrative framework for the stories you imagine about your army. For those interested in the lore through reading, Black Library has published hundreds of novels set in the 40K universe. The Horus Heresy series is a natural starting point, as it tells the founding tragedy of the setting in over 50 novels. The series begins with Horus Rising by Dan Abnett, which introduces you to the galaxy before the fall and makes the eventual betrayal all the more tragic. If the heresy's length seems daunting, other entry points exist. The Gaunt's Ghosts series follows a regiment of the Imperial Guard through numerous campaigns, showing the war from the perspective of ordinary soldiers. The Eisenhorn trilogy presents the Inquisition through the eyes of one Inquisitor, starting with Xenos and following his gradual descent into morally grey territory. The Space Marine Battles series consists of standalone novels about specific campaigns, letting you sample different chapters and writing styles. Video games offer another accessible entry point. Space Marine and its sequel let you play as a Space Marine in third-person action. The Dawn of War series provides real-time strategy gameplay, with campaigns for different factions. Darktide is a co-op first-person shooter set in a hive city facing chaos invasion. Mechanicus is a turn-based tactics game about tech priests exploring Necron tomb worlds. There's even Bolt Gun, a Doom-style boomer shooter where you play as a space marine killing heretics. For those who prefer to engage with the lore more directly, the Warhammer 40,000 wiki is an invaluable resource, containing detailed information about virtually every aspect of the setting. YouTube channels like Luatinsoul9, 40K Theories, and others produce long-form lore videos that dive deep into specific topics. Podcasts discuss the setting, novels, and tabletop game extensively. As you explore, you'll likely find yourself drawn to specific factions or aspects of the setting. Maybe you love the noble tragedy of the Elder. Perhaps the Orc's simple joy in violence appeals to you. You might find yourself fascinated by the Mechanicus's fusion of religion and technology. Or maybe you're drawn to the human element, the regular people trying to survive in this nightmare universe. The community around Warhammer 40,000 is vast and generally welcoming to newcomers. Online forums, subreddit communities, Discord servers, and local gaming stores often have groups happy to answer questions and help newcomers get started. Don't be intimidated by the setting's complexity or the hobby's learning curve. Everyone started as a beginner, and most people are eager to share their passion for this universe. One warning: Warhammer 40,000 can be expensive if you get into the miniatures side of the hobby. Models aren't cheap, and a full army can cost hundreds of dollars before you even start painting. But there's no requirement to buy everything at once. Start small, see if you enjoy the hobby, and build up gradually. And remember that the lore and video games offer ways to engage with the setting without that investment. As you delve deeper, you'll discover that what initially seemed like a straightforward grimdark setting has enormous depth. The contradictions, the moral questions, the sheer scale of imagination that's gone into developing this universe over nearly 40 years, all of it rewards exploration. You'll find corners of the lore that fascinate you, stories that resonate, factions whose aesthetics or philosophy speak to something in you. Warhammer 40,000 is dark, often horrifyingly so. But it's also a setting where heroes exist, where brotherhood and sacrifice matter, where even in the face of inevitable doom, people find reasons to fight on. It asks hard questions about the cost of survival, the nature of loyalty, what happens when good intentions go wrong over millennia, and it does all this while delivering spectacle on an unmatched scale. Closing thoughts. We've journeyed through the major aspects of Warhammer 40,000 together, from the God Emperor on his golden throne to the Chaos Gods in the warp, from the transhuman space marines to the ordinary soldiers of the Guard, from the ancient Necrons to the invading Tyranids. We've explored the Horus heresy that shaped everything and the philosophical questions the setting asks. But this is just the beginning. The universe we've covered tonight spans galaxies and millennia, contains countless worlds and trillions of stories. Every faction has depths we haven't plumbed. Every conflict has details we haven't discussed. Every chapter of Space Marines, every regiment of Guardsmen, every craft world and hive fleet, and Mechanicus Forge world has its own history and character. What makes Warhammer 40,000 special isn't any single element, but how everything interconnects. The Imperium's brutality makes sense when you understand what it's fighting. The nobility of the Space Marines stands out against the darkness they're embedded in. The tragedy of the Horus heresy reverberates through 10,000 years of consequences. Even the smallest detail is connected to the larger whole. This is a setting that rewards investment. The more you learn, the more you'll appreciate the layers of meaning, the connections between disparate elements, the way stories from different corners of the galaxy can intersect in unexpected ways. It's a universe designed for exploration, for asking what if, and finding that someone has already written a story about exactly that scenario. Remember, in the grim darkness of the far future, there is only war. But within that war are stories of courage and sacrifice, of bonds that transcend death, of individuals making choices that matter even when the galaxy itself hangs in the balance. It's dark, yes, grimdark even, but it's also full of moments where that darkness makes the light shine all the brighter. Whether you choose to paint miniatures, read novels, play games, or simply absorb the lore, you're now part of a community that's been building and exploring this universe for decades. Welcome to the 41st Millennium. Welcome to Warhammer 40,000. If you enjoyed this journey through the grimdark future, please consider liking this video and subscribing to the channel for more deep dives into the lore of Warhammer 40,000 and other fascinating fictional universes. The Emperor protects, and thank you for watching.
If you guys enjoyed the story, make sure to hit the subscribe, like, share button, whatever you want. Give me some feedback if there's any, and yeah, sleep well.